We're now entering the month of October in college football, and that means things are starting to happen. We're starting to figure out which teams are good, which teams are bad, and who has a real chance at making the college football playoff, at least somewhat. This past weekend was super entertaining, and now as we look ahead to week 6 of the 2025 college football season, I want to go through the top 25 biggest games and talk about the 25 teams I think will lose this weekend. Obviously, I'm phrasing this because of the YouTube algorithm, as it's more likely this video is going to be seen by a ton of people, literally based on how I title it. In short, we're just going to predict the top 25 games for this upcoming weekend, but there are 25 teams that have to lose. Before we get started though, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about the 25 teams that I think will lose this weekend. Okay, so on Thursday, we have our first game in the month of October, and that'll come against Sam Houston State and New Mexico State. Neither of these teams are any good, as Sam Houston lost their coach to Temple, and New Mexico State just isn't great. Sam Houston State has a chance to get their first win of the season against New Mexico State, and I'm going to pick them to win. I cannot tell you why, but Sam Houston State will be 1-4, and our first loser of the day will be New Mexico State. Our next game is Western Kentucky versus Delaware. This is honestly pretty shocking, as WKU is currently 4-1, and Delaware is 3-1. The Blue Hens are in their first season of college football at the FBS level, and Western Kentucky is typically one of the best teams in Conference USA. Honestly, this game is somewhat difficult to predict, but I'm going to pick WKU. This is the biggest home game that Delaware football has had in quite some time, but I think Western Kentucky wins the game close. On Friday night, the biggest game will be West Virginia taking on BYU. Obviously, this is a Big 12 conference matchup, and West Virginia got a good win over Pitt, but besides that, it's been a forgettable first year for Rich Rodriguez. To make matters worse, after losing a couple of their key skill players, Nico Marquee is now expected to miss a couple of weeks. I think Jalen Henderson will end up being the backup, but it doesn't matter. BYU's ranked, they're undefeated, and they're at home, and they're better. BYU will win this game by at least 2 touchdowns in my opinion, and I think West Virginia will be our third loser of this weekend. To kick off the Saturday slate, we'll have Kentucky against number 12 Georgia. There's been a couple of times in the last few years where some thought Kentucky could pull off an upset, but it always ends up being a blowout. I don't think that'll change this year for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think Kentucky is all that great this year, as they're in rebuild mode with a new quarterback in Cutter Bully, and Georgia's not only at home, but they're mad. Everybody's talking about how it's not the same Georgia, and after losing to Bama last week, I think they're going to absolutely curb stomp Kentucky, and the Wildcats are just the next loser of the week. Up next, we have another Big 12 matchup, and that'll be between number 14 Iowa State and Cincinnati. The Cyclones are off to their best start in quite some time, as they're 5-0, and they have a couple of big wins. Rocco Becht is really good at quarterback, and Carson Hansen has been one of the better running backs in the conference. But Cincinnati has now won 3 straight games, and Scott Satterfield is coaching for his life. What do I mean by that? Well, I think Cincinnati is going to pull off the upset. Currently, they're favored by 1.5, but I just think Iowa State is due, and Cincinnati will get a win here. This will be the first upset pick I make in today's video, and the Cyclones will end up losing this Saturday. If we could turn the calendar back to 2017, maybe the Wisconsin-Michigan game would be really good, but it is currently 2025. Luke Fickell is the head coach for Wisconsin. They still don't have good quarterback play, and they don't have the same level of running backs they used to have. Michigan has a true freshman quarterback, one of the best running backs in the nation in Justice Haynes, and they're at home. They're also 3-1 and ranked number 20, and I see no reason why Michigan does not win by at least 10 points here. Wisconsin is not the same team they used to be, and they're to go from 2-2 to 2-3 and 0-2 in the Big 10 Conference. Our 7th matchup of this weekend will be number 22 Illinois versus Purdue. This is actually a rivalry game as they play for a little Cannon Trophy, and Purdue's going to try to play spoiler here. After eventually climbing into the top 10, Illinois got skull crushed by Indiana, and then bounced back and beat USC. They're looking to beat a Purdue team who's in their first year under head coach Barry Odom, and Illinois desperately needs to win this game. Honestly, I do think Purdue's actually going to hang around and make it close, but ultimately, I think Illinois has better skill players and is better all around, and they will get a win here. Purdue will get their 3rd loss of the season. Boston College has honestly had some terrible luck this year, as they really should have beat Cal and could have easily beat Michigan State. Instead, the Eagles are now 1-3, and they're 0-2 in the conference. The season could be over if they don't get things going here, and Dylan Lonergan has been surprisingly good for them, but Pittsburgh I still think is probably better. They lost this past weekend to Louisville, and if Pitt wants to save their season, they absolutely have to win this Saturday. I'm not quite sure what's going on at the quarterback spot for Pittsburgh, as I know Cole Gonzalez is starting to battle it out with Holstein. But either way, I think this is a battle of 2 teams that'll finish near the bottom of the ACC, but for now, I think the Eagles will be a loser, and Pitt will get to 3-2. Staying in the ACC, we have a matchup that was really intriguing in the preseason, but now means absolutely nothing. Clemson Tigers are 1-3 with an 0-2 mark in the conference, and North Carolina is 2-2, and they have not yet played in the ACC. For a game between two teams that are combining for a losing record, it's honestly pretty intriguing. Dabo Swinney coaching for his life against Bill Belichick, I did not expect that to happen. Clemson has the better skill players and the better team by far, but they have not played well this season, but neither has North Carolina. Honestly, this game is a coin flip to me, but honestly, I think Clemson comes out pretty angry and wins this game by a mile. After a horrendous start to the 2025 college football season, Kansas State is desperately trying to get back. They, like Clemson, seemingly have the talent, but have not been able to put it all together, whereas Baylor, on the other hand, is definitely upset with how they've played so far. They ended up blowing a couple of early games that have put them behind the 8 ball, and they're currently wasting Sawyer Robertson, who has 17 touchdowns and leads the country in passing yards. Baylor is currently 3-2, and I think they will advance to 4-2, as they will beat Kansas State in my opinion. The Wildcats are our next loser, but maybe they can make a surge in the second half of the season. I'm not quite sure why I'm actually picking this game, but on ESPNU, we will see Army play against UAB. This is definitely one of those matchups that everybody's going to forget about, as Army lost to an FCS school in week 1, but then went on the road and beat Kansas State. College football is a weird sport. Trent Dilfer's coaching for his life, and Jalen Kitna has all of a sudden become really good at the quarterback spot. Army's favored by 7.5, but I think UAB is going to pull off an upset here, and the Black Knights will continue to be losers in 2025. For our 12th pick of the night, we're going to talk about the Wake Forest Demon Deacons and the Virginia Tech Hokies. These two will face off on the CW network, and honestly, this is actually a pretty big game. Virginia Tech had a terrible start to the season, but now they have an interim head coach, and they're seemingly fighting. Virginia Tech's 1-0 in the ACC, so if somehow they could pull this off, they could be 2-0. I know that's obvious. Wake Forest barely lost by 1 point last weekend to Georgia Tech, and they're definitely trying to get back on the right foot. To me, this game is definitely a coin toss, but with it being in Blacksburg, I'm going to give the Hokies a little bit of an advantage here, and I think they win. And to wrap up the early window, we have UTSA against Temple. Both of these teams are currently 2-2, and it is a conference game. Owen McCown leads the way at quarterback for UTSA, and they also have one of the top running backs in the nation in Robert Henry Jr., who I believe is second in the country in terms of rushing yards. UTSA is looking pretty decent this year, and I think they're going to go on the road and beat Temple. The Owls are a little bit better than last year, but that's not saying much. Despite being at home, I do think the Temple Owls will lose this weekend. As I was going through the list of teams, I actually figured out we're going to pick 30 games instead of 25. Our next matchup is a Big 12 game, as well as Oklahoma State against Arizona. The Wildcats were undefeated until they lost this past weekend to Iowa State, but now Oklahoma State is desperately looking for a win in the post-Mike Gundy era. The Cowboys are sort of depleted with talent, and Zane Flores is their quarterback, and that's why I think Arizona's going to win. Noah Fafita is a good quarterback, the Cats have played well so far, and I think they're going to advance to 4-1 and get their first conference win of the season. Going over to the Big Ten, we have UCLA versus Penn State. Obviously, Penn State lost at home to Oregon last week in the whiteout, and they're not too happy about that. UCLA, on the other hand, fired their head coach, has one of the worst rosters in all of college football, and is currently winless. If UCLA pulls off this upset, it might be one of the biggest upsets in college football history, and it's not going to happen. UCLA will definitely be a loser this Saturday, and Penn State will get their 4th win of the 2025 season. Going over to the SEC, we have the 3-1 Texas Longhorns facing off with the 1-3 Florida Gators. The Longhorns are a top 10 team, and they'll travel into Gainesville. I know Florida's 1-3, but I would not be shocked if they pulled off the upset here. Florida still has a talented roster, and they had a ton of preseason hype for good reason. The Gators also have a ridiculously hard schedule, and while I think this game will actually be close, I think Texas probably wins by a touchdown. Again, wouldn't be shocked to see the upset here, but I think Texas wins and Florida loses. Another SEC matchup that everybody is super excited to watch is the number 16 Vanderbilt Commodores against the number 10 Alabama Crimson Tide. Honestly, I cannot remember the last time both of these teams were ranked when they played, but I do remember last year. Vanderbilt pulled off one of the biggest upsets in years last year against the Tide, and the Tide players remember that. This time the game is at Bryant-Denny Stadium instead of in Nashville, and that's why I think Alabama will absolutely destroy them. They are sick and tired of hearing about Vanderbilt all offseason, so I think Bama wins by at least 3 touchdowns, and Vanderbilt will get their first loss of the season. Maybe I'm being harsh. One of the more unique games of the weekend will be between Boise State and Notre Dame. After losing to USF in Week 1, Boise State has rattled off 3 straight wins, and Notre Dame, after starting out 0-2, now is 2-2. Notre Dame is at home, so I think they're definitely going to win this game, and I think they're the better team. But Boise State is still intriguing. They were a team that went to the college football playoff last year, and I would not be surprised to see this game close into the second half, but Notre Dame pull away in the fourth quarter. I picked the Irish to win. We now randomly have one of the most unique games of the week, and that is the number 24 Virginia Cavaliers against the Louisville Cardinals. The Cavs are 4-1, and they're ranked for the first time in seemingly forever after they knocked off a top 10 Florida State team last week. They're one incomplete pass against NC State away from being undefeated, and Louisville is undefeated. While they haven't really beaten anyone with a pulse besides Pitt, Louisville's at home, they're undefeated, and Jeff Brom's a good coach. I think this game will be close, but I ultimately am going to pick Louisville to win, get to 5-0, and then next week they will take Virginia's spot in the polls. Virginia is a cool story for now, though. Up next, we have another interesting Big Ten matchup, and that is the Washington Huskies against the Maryland Terrapins. The Terps are also a 4-0 team that's not getting a lot of respect, and that's because they haven't played anybody. Their best win was against Wisconsin, and Washington, on the other hand, ended up losing to Ohio State last week. DeMond Williams and Denzel Boston are two of the more exciting players in the conference, and they'll face off with a true freshman quarterback in Malik Washington. Because the Terps are at home, I think they're ultimately going to win this game close, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Washington comes into College Park and wins. But for now, I'm going to say the Washington Huskies will be losers this Saturday. If there's a team that's been pretty close to as bad as UCLA, it is the Oregon State Beavers. They are currently 0-5, and they're going to travel on the road to Boone, North Carolina, and play against the Appalachian State Mountaineers. Honestly, I love the color scheme, and I love the vibe of this game, and I also think it will be a good game. I know App State is currently 2-2, and Oregon State's been terrible, but the Beavers have lost a couple of close games, and I think they're due. And one of the weirdest picks of the day, I'm actually going to pick Oregon State to go on the road and win this one, and for some reason, I just think it's going to have a crazy finish. A couple weeks ago, a game between Syracuse and SMU would have been a pretty big deal, but the Mustangs have lost a couple. Syracuse had an embarrassing loss last weekend, and Steve Angeli is hurt. All of a sudden, this game really isn't all that big of a deal, but SMU does have a clean conference slate, so it would be huge for them if they want to make a crazy run back to the ACC championship. Kevin Jennings and the Mustangs, I think, are the better team, and they're at home, so I picked them to beat Syracuse, who's trying to figure things out with Ricky Collins at quarterback. Going back over to the Big Ten, we have the 3-1 Michigan State Spartans and the 3-1 Nebraska Cornhuskers. That rule is desperately trying to get the Huskers to a college football playoff appearance, and this is one of those games they just have to win. Michigan State's trying to break out in year 2 under Jonathan Smith, and honestly, this is a battle of two teams that I think are in the middle of the conference, but both of these teams really badly need a conference win as they're both 0-1. With this game being at Nebraska, you'd think they'd have a leg up, but usually they blow these games, but this time I'm going to have some faith in Coach Rule and say Nebraska wins by a field goal. Another really intriguing matchup for this upcoming weekend is the number 11 Texas Tech Red Raiders and the Houston Cougars. Houston has been the surprise of the Big 12 in 2025 as under second-year head coach Willie Fritz and quarterback transfer Connor Weigman. Houston is off to a 4-0 start. They almost blew it last week to Oregon State, but still, they're undefeated, they're 1-0 in the Big 12, and they have a chance to knock off a top 15 Texas Tech team. Baron Morton is dealing with an injury, and while the Red Raiders have put up an incredible amount of points, I think this game is going to be close, and it's honestly a coin flip. As much as I want to pick Houston, I just don't know if I have that level of faith in them yet, and I'm going to say Texas Tech barely wins on the road in a game that'll prove to be pivotal for their season. Going back to the Big Ten, the 3-1 Minnesota Golden Gophers will play against the number 1 4-0 Ohio State Buckeyes. A couple of years ago, to open up the 2021 season, this game was close, but I don't think it's going to be the same story tonight. Ohio State has a new quarterback in Julian Sayin, who's still trying to find his footing. But luckily, the defense is elite, and Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate are both incredible. Drake Lindsey has been better than expected for Minnesota, but they have to prove it to me. ESPN gives Ohio State a 95% chance of winning, and I don't blame them. I think Ohio State wins this game by a lot, but who knows, maybe PJ Fleck pulls off the upset of 2025. Some would argue that the Florida State-Miami game is the game of the week, and it could have been an even bigger game if Florida State didn't blow it to Virginia last weekend. The Canes already have 3 decent wins, they're ranked number 3 and they're 4-0, whereas Florida State has that early win against Bama and then that blunder against Virginia. They fell away to number 18, and this is going to be a crazy atmosphere. This game is obviously a rivalry, and Castellanos versus Beck is going to be exciting football, but as much as I want to pick Florida State to pull it off, I think Miami is a team of destiny this year, and I think they're going to win by 1 score, and it's going to be a second straight week of heartbreak for Noles fans. We now have 4 games left, and if you want to support the channel, be sure to let me know your predictions down below and leave a like. The story of the SEC in 2025 has been the Mississippi State Bulldogs, as they are currently 4-1 in year 2 under Jeff Lebby. Despite having all their best players poached in the portal, Mississippi State has reloaded, and they've been solid. They have a great win against Arizona State, and they'll face off with number 6 Texas A&M, who's also been incredible this year. They pulled off an incredible win against Notre Dame. Mario Craver and Kevin Concepcion have been elite, and Marcel Reed has taken the next step. This game is in College Station. It's going to be loud. I think A&M probably wins by 14, but Mississippi State is tough, and they have an experienced quarterback. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I'm picking the Aggies. Seems that Colorado football always plays on the night slate, so I never get a chance to watch them, but they're 2-3 and 0-2 in the Big 12, going into a game in Fort Worth against TCU. The Horned Frogs had a heartbreaking loss last Friday, and they're hoping to bounce back, and Josh Hooper's hoping for a big game to get himself back on the Heisman path. I honestly don't have a lot of faith in this Colorado team, as they've not really been able to figure out the quarterback spot, and honestly TCU has been pretty solid this year, which is why I'm picking them. I think the Horned Frogs win this game by at least 10 points, and Colorado will fall to 2-4, and there's a lot of questions the Buffaloes will have to start answering. Second to last, we have the 3-2 Kansas Jayhawks against the 3-1 UCF Knights. UCF is one of those teams that's sort of inflated by a bad offseason, as besides that win against North Carolina, they have not really been impressive to me. Scott Frost is hoping to get his first Big 12 win, but I think Kansas is the better team here. Jalen Daniels has tons of experience, Emmanuel Henderson is a really good receiver, and Kansas definitely has to be mad about how they lost last week and how they lost to Mizzou. I think KU is one of the better 3-2 teams in the country. I think they go into Orlando and get their 4th win of the year. Knights are going to start losing a lot of games. And finally, the last game we're going to pick is the Duke Blue Devils against the Cal Golden Bears. Duke's honestly had some good games this year, but they've just been a little bit unlucky. Cal, on the other hand, has been able to be lucky. They are 4-1 despite losing pretty much all of their best players to the transfer portal, and you have to give credit to Justin Wilcox. JKS has been incredible for a true freshman, and while Cal is at home, I think they got super lucky last week in that Duke is the better team. Duke paid a ton of money for a big-time quarterback in Darian Menza, and I do think they get their money's worth next weekend as Duke goes over to California and wins that game and gets their 4th win of the season. So yeah, in today's video, we picked the 30 biggest games for this week of college football, and let me know what you think. Who do you think will win? What game are you looking forward to watching the most? And what topic should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.